Hello, my friends. My name is Michaela Bell. Welcome to my little corner of the internet in this YouTube space. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're going to talk about the neuroscience of why we make dumb decisions when we're in love. Have you ever looked back on a previous relationship and you scratch your head thinking what was I doing? What was I thinking? Why did I date that person? Why did I accept that behavior? This, that, and the other thing, right? So if you're anything like me and you've ever experienced this, there's totally neuroscience to explain why this happens. And I have a slight confession. I am a little bit of a dork and I love to read neuroscience research papers, for fun. And I know that that's slightly not normal, but there was a study that was done, and I'm going to butcher these professors' names, so please forgive me. But it's Professor Samir Zeki and John Ramea from the Wellcome Laboratory of Neurobiology at the University College of London. And they're known for their work in studying brain activity in terms of romantic and maternal love. It's been a couple different studies, but pretty much the really quick synopsis of it, they took a group of people who were varying ages from the ages of 19 to 47. Their relationship length was also varying from 4 months to 27 years. And what they did was they did fMRI scans when they would show pictures of people that they didn't know or friends of theirs. And then they showed them pictures of the people that they were madly in love with and in relationships with. And these fMRI scans showed some really incredible things. Now, I'm not so much interested in the areas of the brain that were activated. I mean, those are definitely really interesting too, but I'm not going to dive into them because what was interesting to me when I was reading this study is actually the areas of the brain that were dramatically deactivated. The deactivated areas involved parts of the temporal, parietal, and frontal cortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is an area of the brain. It's right behind the eyes in the front part of the brain. And it is known for being vitally involved in executive functions such as concentration, organization, judgment, reasoning, decision-making, and other things like emotional regulation and social relational abilities. In other words, it's all the functionalities that we rely on for healthy relationships with ourselves and others. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for controlling your logical decision making. It controls your judgment. It allows you to say, hey, these are my values, and be able to figure out, are these actions in line with the values that I have? When the people in the study saw a picture of the person that they were in love with across the board, that area of the brain was dramatically deactivated. So when I was reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, when you're in love with somebody and you see them, the part of your brain that controls your cognitive and logical decision making is dramatically deactivated. Morality too is also responsible or said to be part of this area of the brain or associated with this part of the brain of the frontal cortex. So it's no wonder that when you're in unhealthy relationships or healthy relationships, that we make dumb decisions when we're in love. So, like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you ever scratch your head and say, what was I thinking? Well, there's a huge part of your brain that was not thinking. Isn't that so fascinating? I find that to be incredibly fascinating. So from this study, I thought, okay, if this is an unconscious thing, right? I can't sit here and say, prefrontal cortex, activate. That's not the way that it works. It's something that is unconscious. So how can we consciously make better decisions when we're in love? How can we set up guardrails or boundaries so that we're successful in this area? I came up with a couple of things that I would love to share with you. Number one, watching this video alone is helping you because it's giving you access to knowledge about how your brain works, and it allows you to go from beating yourself up, saying like, gosh, I'm such an idiot. Why do I always keep doing this? To, oh, maybe I should give myself a little bit of self-compassion. Self-compassion is one of the most important things when it comes to overcoming self-sabotage. It is a requirement in life if you want to have a healthy relationship with yourself and others. Compassion is so important. So forgive yourself and know that part of your brain was not working. So some of your patterns are not your fault, but now it is your responsibility to take that knowledge and say, what can I do with it? How can I set myself up for success? Essentially hack the system. Number 2 is having community, the right community around you, and listening to their advice. So who are the people that in your life that you're like, gosh, they have really beautiful relationships. I would love to be able to have the kind of relationship that they have. They would be a great person to have in your tight circle of friends. But it's important to make sure that you have the right people. For example, if you have a really good friend in your close circle and she has a very unstable relationship with her spouse or her boyfriend, she might not be the best person to go to for relationship advice. Now, maybe she's phenomenal with her finances and she'd be great to give you advice there. Here's a really important key. Don't take mentorship advice from somebody that you wouldn't trade places with. Super important. The other little last piece I'm going to say about this is then take their advice. Have you ever had a friend who comes to you wanting your advice and you give it to them and they don't listen to it and they get themselves in the predicament that you literally could just gave them advice on how to not do? Don't be that friend. I'll just say that. Number 3, trust your intuition. Get to know that still small voice that guides you even when it doesn't make sense. How? Well, I have a whole video coming on how to trust your intuition and how to strengthen that area of your life. But for now, here's a quick tip. I want you to think back to some of the times when you feel like you heard that voice and you overrode it. Maybe it was in a relationship where you're like, something about this feels off. Or maybe a job that you were in the interview process and you're like, something about this feels off. But you overrode it and then kicked yourself later. I want you to think back to those times and ask yourself the following questions. What did it sound like? What did that still small voice sound like? And what did it feel like in your body? What were the sensations that you felt? Like for me, I tend to feel things like in my chest. And then the other question to ask yourself is, what made you doubt it? Specifically, what did those thoughts sound like? You know, there's that saying of like the angel and the devil. It's kind of true. So you have your intuition and then you have something else that says, but this is the only job, you really need to take it. It's that scarcity mindset. And this one tends to be a little bit louder than the small intuition, that still small voice. For me personally, I feel like that's God. It's the Holy Spirit guiding you. But I also respect everyone's beliefs. And this is my personal belief that everybody has intuition. We just have to learn how to notice it and then how to trust it. Number 4 is to get clear on what healthy love looks like. If I said, which I recently did, my office is a mess, it does not work for me. I first have to think about, well, what would this office look like if it did work for me? And I have to think about, where do I want things? Same thing with love and healthy relationships. It's easier to have a healthy relationship if you know what healthy love looks like. Some of us don't, and that's okay. Maybe it hasn't been modeled that well for us. But think about, what are the things that I really desire to have in a healthy relationship? The next one, number 5, is understand your values. I hear women say they have a list all the time. You know the list, right? It usually sounds like 6'5", tall, dark, and handsome, has a great job, loves his mom, goes to church, or is a Christian. The one thing I'll tell you is it shocks women all the time because I have a course, an online course specifically for single Christian women. And I tell them all the time that Christian should not be on the list. And they're like shocked. Bear with me while I explain this for you. Here's what I mean by that. It's easy for someone to write Christian on a dating profile and you say, oh, check that box off. And I say, no, box not checked off. Just because you may have the same moral compass does not mean you have the same values. There's a difference between a Christian relationship and two Christians in a relationship. So they could go to church, but let's talk about what kind of values do they actually have. But first, you need to know, what are your own values? And then what are the values that you really want in the person that you're looking for? Character is often revealed in the way that they treat people that they don't need. So I'm always looking at does he treat somebody, whether it's a waitress at the restaurant or the valet. Like, think about, how does he treat those people? Those things matter. Number 6, this is pretty much two different parts of this, but there are ways that you can actually enhance your prefrontal cortex activation. And those are things like practicing mindfulness, meditation, journaling. And then the most important thing is moving your body every single day. You don't have to do a 60-minute like hardcore workout, but move your body every single day and get good sleep. There's a bunch of really cool articles that I read about how to enhance your prefrontal cortex activation that I'm going to link in this. But all this to say, I want you to give yourself some compassion if you've ever looked back and thought, what the heck were you thinking? Well, part of your brain was actually not thinking. This is why neuroscience is so cool. At least I think it is. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what some of your biggest takeaways were. And if you have a friend who's single, or you feel like you keep seeing her in a repeated pattern in relationships, send this video to her. Give her a little bit of love. Hey, I thought about you. I've learned a ton. I think you would too. Let's maybe talk about it. If you need a guide for growth, you've come to the right place. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and